Hi guys, I'm Ruslan. Let's get into this shocking story right now.
The lawyer read my father's will like it was weather-steady voice, small print, no room for lightning. Then he said my wife's name. To Anna Mercer, he read, adjusting his glasses as if that could soften syllables. I leave the deed to the Pine Hollow cabin, with gratitude for the summers that saved me. My mother exhaled like she'd been punched through cloth. My sister looked at me, then at the dark cherry conference table, as if another piece of furniture might be my answer. I did what I always do when something breaks. I took inventory. My father, Richard Mercer, 37 years with my mother, 7 patents, 2 bad knees, 1 heart attack he survived and 1 he didn't just left our family cabin to my wife. The lawyer kept going scholarships, a donation to the museum, instructions about the hospice garden because paper has the spine to keep speaking when rooms forget how. I watched Anna's hands on her lap. She didn't twist her ring, she didn't reach for mine. She kept them still, a calm I knew in storms that weren't ours. After, in the parking lot where grief and logistics pull up to the curb and idle, my mother said, very carefully, is there something I should know? Anna opened her mouth, closed it. Her face found that expression I had learned at dinner tables and hospital chairs, the one that asks for time and forgiveness before it asks to be believed. Elaine, she said softly, I didn't know. I mean, I knew he loved the cabin. I didn't know about this. My mother looked at her like a woman examining a crack she can't decide is cosmetic. He didn't give me the summers, she said, mostly to herself. I stayed for the winters. We drove home through a town that knows how to carry the weight of one family's drama without spilling it. Anna sat beside me with her body angled toward the window, the way she does when she wants to be brave and honest at the same time. The glove compartment stuck, like always. The traffic light at Maple took too long, like always. The world had the gall to remain itself. In the kitchen, the plants on the sill minded their business. The casserole a neighbor had dropped off at noon pretended to be generosity instead of resignation. I set the envelope with the deed on the table and looked at it like a live wire. Anna stood across from me and placed both palms flat, as if swearing the room in. Liam, she said, I didn't ask for this. That's not the question, I said. I sounded more courteous than I felt. It's my least favorite thing about myself. What is the question? She asked, voice level, eyes doing the hard work of staying. How did my father end up giving you a cabin he took my mother to when she was pregnant with me? I said. And me to when I scraped my knee so badly at 8 I thought I had invented blood. She swallowed. I don't know. You do know something, I said. You're choosing which truth to be first. She closed her eyes and opened them again, her tell when she reaches for courage instead of defense. He called me last summer, she said. When you were in St. Louis for the conference, after the second day you didn't answer. He said he couldn't get through to you either. He asked if I needed anything. I said our AC was ancient and our dog was panting like a harmonica. He sent a guy from the shop to look at it. He said I should go cool off at Pine Hollow if I wanted while the repairs were happening. He sounded kind. How long were you there? I asked. 3 hours, she said. It smelled like cedar and black coffee. The window over the sink sticks. She smiled at the detail like it could absolve her. Your dad left a note. Leave the lake as you found it, and it will leave you alone. I knew the note. He wrote it on a napkin the summer the dam broke and suddenly everyone had boats and chaos. That can't possibly add up to him willing you a deed, I said. It doesn't, she said. There's more. I just don't know which part will hurt least to begin with. Begin with together, I said. Did you tell me that he invited you to the cabin? No, she said. I didn't think it mattered. That afternoon you came home early with a St. Louis t-shirt and airport fries. We ate them on the porch and watched a storm roll in and decided the dog needed a thunder name. It was a good day. I didn't want to spend it narrating a favor your dad did me. I remembered the storm. I remembered the way she had sat closer than the weather required. What else? I asked. She looked at the envelope like it might provide a cue card. He called again in the fall, she said, after your mother's cardiology follow-up. He sounded scared in that way proud men sound right before they tell you something soft. He asked me how you were doing with grief you hadn't had yet. He said you were his beam and he worried beams crack quietly. He asked me to promise to keep you from turning into your lists. Did you promise? Yes, she said. Then, he told me about the summers before you. The year the roof leaked and your mom wanted to sell. The canoe he patched 3 times because he hated surrender. The night the generator died and he decided candles made better fathers anyway. He made it sound like the cabin was the only place he had ever been allowed to be a version of himself that didn't require an audience. And then, I asked, because I could hear a then in her throat. And then winter, she said. And then he got quiet. And then he called and said the snow was clean enough to start the year over, and asked if I wanted to borrow it again to think. I said no. I said I wasn't going to make the cabin a habit. He laughed and said I was the first Mercer to use the word boundary and mean it. I wanted to smile. I did not. Did you go? I asked. I didn't, she said. The dog came into the kitchen, confused by the math on our faces. He put his head on my knee like a punctuation mark we hadn't earned. Why did he will it to you? I said. Why you? She shook her head, a small motion that made me ache because I knew it meant she had run out of strategy and was about to hand me a truth she didn't want to live in. Because I was there more than I told you, she said, voice barely above the room. Not alone, with him, to talk. She stopped. It started after his second fall. My father fell in the grocery store in aisle 6 and refused the ambulance because no Mercer rides reclined unless it's his choice. I drove him to urgent care anyway, watched them glue his scalp, watched him make jokes about the stupidness of skulls. I took him home to my mother, who said nothing and made soup, and watched him like you watch a clock when you're late. You were working 12-hour days, Anna said, not accusing, just assembling. Your mother was sleeping in the chair, refusing to give the bed the satisfaction. He didn't want to be babied, and the only person left who wasn't insisting he be strong was me. He came by with muffins like a cover story and asked if I'd take a ride to the lake to let the trees recalibrate me. It was so, him. I said yes. How many rides? I asked, counting and hating myself for counting. 3, she said. And how many stays? 1, she said. And before I could ask, it was for hours. He told me about the first time he smelled snow and knew it was going to stay. He told me about the year he almost left engineering to build small wooden boats and call himself a carpenter until my mother said she married a man who could keep the lights on. He told me he was tired of being useful. I sat down because my legs joined the room in losing their manners. Did you? I started, and stopped because I am not a man who asks for porn from the people I love. No, she said, understanding anyway. Not then. Her voice broke on the second word. We later, once, twice, then more. It wasn't a storm, it was a drift. And then it was something I didn't have a noun for because all the nouns made me a person I didn't want to be. There it was, the simple, ugly geometry. My wife had slept with my father. Not once in a cheap motel with guilt and giddy. Repeatedly, in a cabin he considered a sanctuary, with stories for kindling. I let air be the only thing in my mouth for a minute because language threatens to make you noble when you're not. The dog sighed. The refrigerator hummed. In another house, someone was laughing at a game show. The world stayed vulgar and fine. How long? I asked. A year and change, she said. Until his heart. We ended before he died. It doesn't make it smaller, it just makes it the right sentence. He left you the cabin, I said, because facts are the only thing I can hold when meaning is slippery. He left you the cabin and he wrote the summers that saved me while my mother was learning to sleep without the pillow he stole. Anna's face was suddenly wet. It wasn't love in a way that competes, she said. It was a room where he wasn't the family's lighthouse. It was a room where I wasn't your beam. We should have found that room inside the house. We didn't. That's not the cabin's fault. That's ours. I stood up because chairs are for people who agree on nouns. Did he groom you? I asked. The word heavy and wrong and maybe right. Did he use the father-shaped part of himself to make you feel chosen? She didn't flinch. Yes, she said. And I said yes. Both things are true. It wasn't a crime. It was a breaking. I am not asking you to excuse it because the sentences fit together into a paragraph that makes me understandable. I am telling you so you don't have to spend a decade guessing. I walked to the sink because I didn't know where to put my hands if not underwater. The window stuck on the way up, like it always does in late March, with swelling with weather. Outside, the maple showed the pale underside of its leaves storm language. What do you want? I asked the glass. I want to tell your mother, she said. I want to give her the deed. I want to burn the cabin and rebuild a smaller, uglier, honest house in a town that remembers us, but not this. I want, she stopped. I want you to not have to be a man who can recite the dates of his betrayal. I want a version of us that doesn't require anybody to be a son and a husband and a nurse and a calendar with legs all at once. I turned and looked at the woman I married at the courthouse because we had spent the wedding money on a transmission and had called it a metaphor. She had been my friend before she was my ring. That was the cruelest part, betrayal written in a hand I knew. We're telling my mother, I said. Tomorrow? We're taking the deed and the sentence, and we're going to put both on the table and see what survives of the room. My mother listened the way carpenters look at beams, angles, load, where the failures hide. She heard enough to know we weren't telling her everything she might imagine, and were telling her more than anyone should have to swallow without water. I knew something, she said when the three of us ran out of courage. Not the shape, the smell. Your father came home smelling like cedar and coffee and decision. I thought it was retirement. I hoped it was joy. I did not ask because I have loved him, and not asking was always the cheaper religion. She took the envelope and slid the deed out and read the line about Summers, and her face did something I had never seen: relief fighting with outrage, grief flirting with permission. I don't want the cabin, she said. If I keep it, it will become a museum I curate for a man who turned me into a docent. If you keep it, you will make it either a shrine or a punishment. Neither is my problem anymore. She pressed the paper back into the envelope and handed it to Anna. Here, I release it, she said. And I release you. She looked at me, steady. I am not releasing you, she added. You're mine. I tried to smile. It almost worked. We drove to Pine Hollow because there are conversations that require a lake to witness them. The road curled in memory. The sign, hand-painted by my father in 1989, had faded to a humility I wanted to imitate. The cabin sat like it had always sat, slightly slumped, perpetually forgiving. The key lived on top of the doorframe under a flat rock, like always, because men like my father think hiding is a parlor trick. Inside, the air smelled like the way my childhood looked. Anna stood in the center of the main room, as if waiting for the house to call her by name. I opened windows and let in air and what passes for absolution when you're not in the business of it. On the mantel, among pictures that told lies about continuity, me at 8 with a fish I didn't catch. My mother pregnant, sun on her face like she invented it. My father holding a canoe like a sentence he botched, sat a sealed envelope with my name. Liam, I did not touch it immediately. You learn, with the dead, to pace intimacy. I made coffee on the percolator that has never failed. I did the ritual with the filter the way he taught me, because muscle memory is grief's favorite theater. I set 2 mugs on the table and put the envelope between them like a third presence. Then I opened it. Son, if you're reading this, I didn't get brave fast enough. There's not a word for the thing I did. There are words, plural, and I've tried them on like coats. Selfish, grasping, cowardly. Also, honest, finally, briefly. None fit, or all do, which is the trouble with nouns. I won't ask you to forgive. I will ask you to see. Not me. You. The being you become. The way you tried to hold the house without asking whether it was your job. I loved your mother. I loved you. I loved the room that wasn't those loves. And I am ashamed of how greedy the sentence looks when you line it up like that. I left the cabin to Anna because she made it into a place where someone could sit without performing usefulness. Your mother and I lost that language in here. That is my fault. It is not Anna's to keep. If she gives it back or burns it or turns it into a library for people who need to learn the word boundary, applaud whatever she does. There's a drawer in the desk. Bottom left. The one that sticks. Take the folder. Decide what to do with the story inside. Don't let it decide you. Dad. I held the paper and thought about the day he taught me to tie a bowline over the tree, around the trunk, back down the whole, and how proud he'd been of his stupid, useful metaphors. I thought about him at the hospital, telling jokes at nurses because he didn't know what to do with the attention. I thought about January, when Anna asked me to talk after the pipes, and I said we would schedule it. I thought about my mother, the docented version of herself in a gallery of his artifacts. Do you want me to leave? Anna asked quietly. No, I said, and surprised myself with the speed. I opened the desk drawer. It stuck. I jostled it the way you do, left down, right up, and it gave. Inside, a blue folder, soft from handling. I pulled it out and sat on the floor because chairs are for certainty. It wasn't photos, it wasn't letters, it was lists, dates, times, the kind my father made when he wanted to pretend science could make sorcery obedient. 10 entries, 15, 20. The last one 3 months before he died. Beside each date, 2 words: talked, breathed, cried, breathed, slept, breathed. Every one ended with breath. On the last page, a single sentence: I forgot how to breathe alone. I passed the folder to Anna without looking at her face because mercy sometimes requires you to use your peripheral vision. She read. She put her hand to her mouth the way women do when they're trying to keep sentences from escaping. I'm sorry, she said. To the room, to me, to whatever version of my father walks through cabins still and picks up cups and puts them down again and searches for a radio station that isn't static. I know, I said. We sat on the floor together. The dog explored the corners like a detective with no orders. The lake made its lake noise, the small applause water gives the shore when it decides not to leave. What do you want to do with it? She asked after a while. Meaning the cabin, meaning the deed, meaning the decade of air we had just swallowed. I don't know, I said, which felt like a promotion. Not make a museum. Not make a bonfire. Maybe make a room where we don't pretend to be anything we can't keep being. Will you leave me? She asked, because love without nouns invites bravely cruel questions. I don't know, I said again. I want to know more before I know less. How did this become possible? When did we stop knowing how to ask for the room we took? She nodded, a small, exhausted motion. Then ask me, she said. So I did. I asked inelegant, embarrassing, non-heroic questions. I asked why she answered when he called. I asked why she didn't tell me the first time he told her about the roof leak in 1992 like it was prophecy. I asked why she didn't run, the way girls in cautionary tales run. I asked why I didn't see it, the way sons in real life don't. She said because he was kind to the part of her that wasn't my wife. She said because he apologized gracefully for decades, in advance, by becoming indispensable to everyone else. She said because I was being a good son and a competent man and an excellent calendar and a bad lover of her whole self. She said because power is subtle in families, and she had learned to allocate mercy upward. We walked to the dock and sat with our feet not touching the water like we were children, and a lifeguard had said not yet. The sky did a sky thing. The breeze did what breezes do when grief is near. It acted like it had invented comfort. Your mother, Anna said. How will you forgive him for what he did to her? I won't, I said. I'll forgive him for what he thought he had to be loved. The rest is between her and whatever God takes walk-ins. We slept at the cabin on separate couches because ritual matters even when it isn't holy. In the morning, I made eggs that tasted like memory and Anna made coffee that tasted like trying. We drove back to town with the folder in the trunk and the deed on the dash and a silence that didn't ask us to fill it. At home, my sister, Ruth, sat on the porch steps with a face that meant she had knocked until the door learned manners. Mom told me, she said without preamble. I'm furious and I'm unsurprised. That's an ugly sentence to carry. I made scones. I didn't know what else to do. We ate scones like medicine. Ruth looked at Anna long and directly. Are you staying? She asked, a kindness disguised as a threat. I'm asking to, Anna said. You don't get to curate this, Ruth said to me more than to Anna. You don't get to be noble because you're good at it. If you stay, stay because you want a hard life in the right house. If you go, go because you want peace that isn't bought with someone else's shame. Noted, I said, because my sister is a better version of the truth when it's angry. I called a therapist because I have learned to hire professionals when my metaphors fail. Her office smelled like lemons and legal pads. She asked me the question people who do their job correctly ask. Do you want to repair, she said, or do you want to record? Both, I said, because I always think I can have two things. Pick for 3 months, she said. You can change your mind. You can't do both at once without turning your life into work product. Record, I said, and surprised myself by how quickly the word volunteered. 2 weeks into recording, my mother called at 6:30 a.m. her time for emergencies and recipes. I cleaned the closet, she said. He kept everything. She brought over a banker's box of small crimes, napkins with notes, maps with routes circled, a receipt for a canoe patch kit from 1991, at the bottom, a short stack of Polaroids of the cabin in winter snow up to the sill, a pair of boot prints, a mug steaming on the rail like a cliché that earned it. I decided not to make a religion of being surprised, she said, sitting at our table. I am going to see Harriet, her therapist, not her cousin. I am going to paint the bedroom a color that admits I live there alone. I am going to go to the cabin exactly once, to say goodbye to the woman who learned to iron curtains because your father liked the look of smooth windows. She looked at Anna and then at me. If you keep each other, keep all of each other, she said. Stop pretending the parts that frighten you make you unlovable. They make you important. Loved is easy. Important is work. After she left, Anna stood by the sink and put her hands on the counter and cried, quiet, the way houses want theirs to be. I stood with her, not touching, the way men think support looks like space. She reached for me and I stepped closer because I am learning that sometimes help looks like proximity, not tools. We spent 3 months on record facts, timelines, nouns until the folder had weight and my chest had a different kind. Then I told the therapist we were ready for repair or to admit we weren't. Repair, it turns out, is not an apology tour. It's a boring class where you learn to say, out loud, window, when you need air, and door, when you need change, and wall, when you need boundaries, and chair, when you need to rest. It is the humility of furniture. It is deciding not to be architecture you can brag about. We made Thursday 7 p.m. our ugly truth hour. No performance, no auditions for innocence. No using my father as a shield or a sword. The first Thursday, Anna said, I miss the way he asked questions without telling me the answer he wanted. I said, I miss the way you told me about paintings before you told me about plans. We ate bad pasta and didn't fix anything. We went to bed and slept like people who have accepted that some nights the house creaks because it's wood, not because it's haunted. At the end of part 1, here is the only claim I will make. We didn't burn the cabin, and we didn't bless it. We drove out with my mother and Ruth on a Sunday, when the sky let everything be blue for free. We opened the blue folder on the table. We read the sentence I forgot how to breathe alone and we didn't make it holy. We made it honest. We decided the cabin will not be a shrine or a museum. It will be a room. We will loan it to people who need to learn how to sit without performing usefulness. We will call it the breathing room, and put a cheap plaque by the door that says, this place is for telling the truth without auditions. Is that forgiveness? I don't know. It's governance. And because a story that begins with a will should ask the living to answer. I'll leave this for you while we keep doing the work. If your father left your spouse the cabin for the summers that saved me, would you torch the place, hand it back to your mother, or turn it into something that refuses both shrine and shame? And if you stayed with the person who stood in that room with him, what single rule would you write on the wall first? Window, door, wall, or chair? We found the second letter because the desk gave up pretending to be whole. The back panel in the cabin's old writing desk bowed when I slid the blue folder in. A small rain of cedar dust fell like punctuation. I reached behind the drawer, fingers fishing where splinters keep secrets, and something slick brushed my knuckles. An envelope, my name again, but smaller, like a whisper of the first. Liam, open only if you are making things structural. I didn't open it in the cabin. I took it home because some words belong in the house where they'll do their damage. At our kitchen table, the same cherry where the deed had scalded us, I slid my thumb under the flap. Son, if by now you are keeping records instead of swinging, good. The cabin bequest was a legal tool, not a trophy. Don't let the worst interpretation be the only one standing. Talk to Hank, you know, the one about a qualified disclaimer within 9 months. Anna's refusal can send title not back to me, which would be a magic trick even I can't manage, but into the residuary, which if you read the next paragraph of the will I didn't let you see in a hurry feeds a charitable trust. The trustee is named with a blank for you to fill. I gambled on you not mistaking governance for romance. Forgive the appetite, engineers can't help wanting systems. If she doesn't disclaim, it's hers. If she does, it becomes what it should have been when I still had hands. A room for people who need to practice breathing before they go home and try not to forget. Don't sate me, don't spare me. Do the work. Dad. I reread the line about 9 months until it stopped sounding like an invitation and started sounding like a dare. Let me, Anna said quietly, palm out. She read without sitting. When she looked up, I recognized the face she wears when she can see the shape of a hard thing and knows she won't be allowed to move it alone. So he gave it to me, she said, as the first domino in a path he knew he couldn't ask of you directly. Or, I said, because I am learning to hold more than one true thing at once. He gave it to you because he crossed a line. And he also knew the only way to keep it from becoming a shrine or a punishment was to force us to become structural. Both, she said, and her mouth found a sad, correct line. We took the letter to Hank the lawyer with tide pool eyebrows and a voice that always sounds like he just swallowed a mint. He didn't flinch at the word affair or the word father. He folded his hands like a man whose religion is procedure and said, a disclaimer under state law and federal code can root the interest as if you never had it. If the residuary is to the Mercer Fund the will names, it can hold the cabin if we draft an amendment clarifying the purpose. The clock has started, and I'm not in the business of metaphors. What purpose? I asked. Hank pushed his glasses up and pulled a thin stack from a file I hadn't noticed. Your father left notes with the drafting attorney, he said. Not instructions. Desires. A space for caregivers, spouses, children who became beams too, early people, who perform usefulness until they forget how to ask for air. Not therapy. Chairs. Windows. Names of things on walls. He gave me the pages. My father's blocky engineer printing. Swore on every line that he knew what he had done and also what he wanted us to do better. We'll do it, Anna said before I could decide to be noble or resentful. I'll disclaim. I'll sit on the board if Elaine wants me to. I'll sit out if she wants me to. I'll scrub the floors with a toothbrush. But the deed can't live with my name. Not if we want to ever be able to open a window in our kitchen. And not smell speechless cedar. Hank's eyebrows did something like approval and exhaustion had a child. We left with timelines, draft language, and a folder whose weight meant our vocabulary would change by paperwork or by fire. The town found out in the dairy aisle. The way towns do when secrets walk too slowly. A woman I've known since 3rd grade looked at our milk and then at me like she was measuring the distance between what she'd heard at her sister's salon and what my face could carry. I'm sorry about your dad, she said, and then, as if a second sentence had been loaded behind the first and could not be stopped. I didn't know cabins could move like that. Some things are movable, I said. Some aren't. We're trying to pick right. She blinked, recalibrated, handed me a coupon I didn't need, and chose silence. I wanted to thank her for not offering an opinion dressed as a casserole. At home, my sister Ruth took off her coat like she was unwrapping an argument. Mom wants in, she said. On the board, on the name, on the rules. It's not a church, I said. No, Ruth said, but it's not a court either. Mom says if this is going to belong to grief, it needs a sign that says we don't do trials here. Anna nodded, the grateful kind, a relief that looked almost like permission. She should name a room, she said. Your mother. Ruth pulled a notebook out of her bag. Ruth inventories feelings into nouns and then tapes them to walls. I made a list, she said, of things the cabin must promise and things it must refuse. She read like she'd practiced. Promise chairs you don't have to ask if you're allowed to sit in. Promise windows that open. Promise tea anyone can make without feeling like they're stealing. Promise no altars. Promise no mission statements that use the words journey or transformational unless the person wants them. She flipped a page. Refuse secrets. Refuse trophies. Refuse plaques with men's names on them unless those men did the dishes. I laughed, then surprised myself by crying into my palm like a person half my age. My sister put her head against my shoulder for 3 seconds, strictly measured, and said, We're not doing this perfectly. We're doing it on time. A week later we went back to the cabin with my mother, a painter's tape roll, 3 legal pads, and for opinions about the right kind of light bulbs. The lake in late November behaves like a woman who has learned to keep her coat on. Elaine, my mother of soup and silence and 17 years of letting my father think he invented rooms, stood in the doorway a long time before stepping over the threshold. When she did, she took off her shoes. I will not leave shoe prints on the floor of a place I'm trying not to cure it, she said. We walked room to room with blue tape and wrote words on the little flags like we were labeling organs. Window, chair, door, wall, On one flag, in Ruth's handwriting, table where nobody performs usefulness. On another, hooks for coats of people who forgot to be weatherproof. We put the blue folder on the mantle and my mother looked at it like she was deciding whether she had any mercy left in her fingers. She opened it to the lists with breath. At the end of every entry Anne traced one of the words with a forefinger, not because she forgave it but because she wanted to remember the handwriting she'd spent a life reading around. Your father was a man who practiced being useful the way other men practice golf, she said. It made him helpful. It made him unbearable. It made him beloved. It made him someone people handed their worrying to. He took mine and then he outsourced it to a woman I didn't have the courage to ask to leave. This is not me pardoning anyone. This is me saying I don't want to be docent to that sentence anymore. She handed the folder to Anna. Write me a letter, she said. Anna blinked. Now. No, Elaine said, soon. Not a confession. A record. Tell me what parts of my husband you kept alive for me without my permission, and what parts you took so I didn't have to. I will write you one back that tells you what parts of my life I forgot to live because I married the lighthouse. Then we will put both in a drawer labeled archive and not alter. Anna's chin wobbled, then steadied. Yes, she said. I can do that. Snow arrived early, the quiet kind that makes roads into close calls and rooms into choices. For a week, the town let us be, perhaps because storms redistribute attention. Then the gossip swung back with boots on. A man at the hardware store offered me a hand on the shoulder that I couldn't tell if I wanted. He was a hell of an engineer, he said. Men like that don't retire good. I chose to hear it as memory, not absolution. On the second Thursday of December, our ugly truth hour, Anna slid an envelope across our table. For your mother, she said, but it's yours to read if you want. I didn't want. I did anyway. It wasn't a clever letter. It was a ledger of sentences that refused pretty. It said, I answered the phone because a kind voice sounded like the first quiet room I'd been offered in a year of machines and charts. It said, I should have come to you and said, I need a window, and instead, I borrowed one with your father in it. It said, I won't narrate the minutes. They're not the story. It said, if you want me nowhere near the board, say so and I will sit at home and make soup for whoever is tired from the work you do without asking my name to be on a plaque. It said, I am not asking to be forgiven. I am asking to be put to work in the correct place. It ended, simply, I am sorry, without if or but. Anna. I carried it to Elaine in the morning. She read once, folded it in half, then again. Tell her I want her and I don't, she said. That's the honest answer. Tell her she can be on the board. If she promises to vote against her own comfort when, that's what the room needs. We filed the disclaimer in January. Hank's office smelled like wool and certainty. Anna signed the qualified refusal with hands that didn't shake. The deed, legally, walked itself into the Mercer Fund with a clause that made the cabin's purpose unmistakable even to future versions of us, or to cousins we hadn't thought to predict. We named the trust the breathing room, because everything else sounded like brochures. The board, Elaine chair, me secretary, Ruth treasurer, two people who were not Mercers at all, school counselor and a hospice nurse and, yes, Anna, in a seat designated former participant, present worker. At our first meeting, we wrote the rules with the economy my father wished he'd used sooner. On the top line, no alters, no trials, shares, windows, names of things. On the second, tell the truth without auditions. On the third, if you try to make this place into your penance, someone will send you home to rest. The town sent casseroles anyway. It also sent 3 handwritten notes that mattered more. One from a widower who said he had been afraid to go home for 2 years after his wife died, because the house expected a man he didn't know how to be. One from a teenager who had been the translator for her parents since she was 7 and wanted to learn how to be a child for an hour. One from a pastor who wrote, I have a key ring to other people's rooms. I need one to mine. We opened in March, because fresh snow makes for good silence and we wanted quiet to feel earned. We did not do a ribbon. We put coffee on the counter and taped blue flags to walls and waited. People came, not as pilgrims, as customers of air. They sat. They looked out of windows. They wrote cheap, honest things in a not fancy guest book. Sat by a heater until I remembered my own name. Told my husband I want to be asked better questions. Ate an orange without apologizing. We didn't ask stories at the door. We offered chairs. The cabin took to its new job like wood takes to warmth. Not everything in town softened because we had found a use for cedar. A cousin called to ask whether we were canonizing sin. I told him to try being tired for a decade and then call me back. A friend avoided my eyes for months, then admitted his father had also built a secret room and he had gone into it and sat there and liked it, which was worse, in some ways, than what my father had done, because it meant he understood. We were 6 months into the trust when winter loosened its grip enough for one last storm-heavy, wet snow that pulls at roofs and old trees. The power went out. The cabin's generator coughed and held. People came with thermoses and their phones set to airplane mode and sat in the breathing room with hats still on and cheeks pink by weather and looked at each other like they were inventing a species. Someone lit a candle and set it in a jar. Elaine looked at me from the kitchen and smiled without winning or losing in it. "You're allowed to come," Ruth told me the next Thursday. "This isn't a house you manage, it's one you borrow." I went. I sat in a chair near the window that faces the birches. I thought, for the first time in a long time, about nothing I could convert to a plan. I breathed like a person whose lungs belonged to him. When I got home, Anna was making spaghetti and burning the garlic and cursing the way people curse when they're alive. She looked at my face and said, "Good," I said, "better." The twist came not as a thunderclap, but as a gentle, infuriating arithmetic problem. Hank called. "We found an addendum," he said. "Your father's drafting attorney retired and, while closing files, discovered a memorandum that never made it into the will packet. It's not binding, but it explains why the cabin bequest had to go to Anna first." I braced for romance disguised as jurisprudence. "It's less scandal," Hank said, "and more math. The memo, in your father's print, read, 'Elaine will decline anything that looks like an apology disguised as property. Liam will try to atone by taking on maintenance, and it will ruin his marriage. Ruth will turn it into a curriculum and forget to eat. If I put the cabin in the trust from the jump, they will build a museum to my contradictions. Put it in Anna's name so someone has to choose for reasons other than DNA, then offer a path to the thing itself.'" I sat with that grossly intimate accuracy and tried not to turn it into either exoneration or curse. It was a system. It was also a sentence about us that he didn't have the courage to say out loud. We would have hated him for his clarity. We hated him a little for his cleverness. Both seemed fair. We kept using the room. On a Tuesday in June, the hospice nurse we'd put on the board, Tasha, who ties her hair up with pencils, asked if she could host a 2-hour permission class, not therapy. Just a circle where people practice saying sentences like, "I need 3 hours alone without being admired or punished, and I want to change my mind without making it a scandal." We said yes. The class filled in 6 minutes. A man who had not stopped being a boss when he left his office cried into a paper napkin and said, "I didn't know asking could sound like that." At home, on a late August night when every window begged to be open and the dog occupied the cool stripe of the floor, Anna handed me a small notebook. "From the bottom of your father's blue folder," she said. I missed it. It was wedged between the cardboard and the last page. Inside, a list of names, not ours. People who had used the cabin in the last 30 years. Beside each, a word: rest, read, quiet, laugh, decide, leave, return. At the bottom, Elaine paint, no dates, no times, just verbs, the only honest sort of nouns. My mother painted there. I murmured. Anna nodded. He must have taken her, or she took herself. I brought the notebook to Elaine the next morning with coffee and a reluctance to be the messenger of someone else's softer truth. She ran her finger under the word paint like a student. "Once," she said, 1987, before, Ruth, before you, winter, he left me there with a thermos and a blank canvas and drove to town. Came back with a loaf of bread and a better mood. I painted an awful pine that looked like a confession." She smiled. "Small. Then we went home and I put the painting in the attic. And we didn't speak of it because we didn't know how to live in a house with 2 artists. We went to the attic with coffee breath and old dust and found the terrible pine. It looked like a child's drawing of honesty. We carried it down to the kitchen and leaned it against the wall and decided it belonged in the cabin on the promise that no plaque would try to tell it what it meant. That afternoon, Anna taped a blue flag to the wall above our kitchen table. It said Table Home and under it, in her hand, Thursdays 7 p.m. Tell the thing. We ate pears that dripped down our wrists and let the stickiness stand for being alive. People assume the twist belongs to the dead. In our case, it belongs to the living. The twist is that nothing we built was repayment. It didn't erase nouns. It didn't launder verbs. It didn't make our marriage impressive. It made it specific. Specific is better than impressive. The only person I had not faced was the version of my father who lives in me and likes to fix things so I don't have to feel them. I met him on a Wednesday in September at 3:10 p.m., when the new sump pump failed and the basement at the cabin filled ankle deep. I went alone with 3 towels like a fool, standing in cold water with a wrench in my hand. I had a stupid, sacramental thought. This is how he kept from drowning. He did tasks. He made grief small enough to hold with a socket set. I turned the valve, called a plumber, and sat on the steps with my feet in the water and cried 5 minutes by my watch, then stopped because the plumber arrived and I had to be a person. It did not absolve him. It did not condemn him. It introduced me to my own tendency to choose wrenches over sentences. That night, I told Anna. She put her feet in my lap and said, "Thank you for not turning the wrench into a religion." Autumn is when the lake remembers it was always going to be cold. We put blankets on the backs of chairs and told the people who came that they were allowed to fall asleep on purpose. On the anniversary of the will reading, we set 4 mugs on the cabin table. Elaine, Ruth, me, and Anne wrote down 1 rule each for the next year on index cards. Elaine wrote, "No more docent. Paint, badly, weakly." Ruth wrote, "No performing usefulness. Teach the class, then be a person who eats." Anna wrote, "If I need a window, I say window. If I want to leave the house, I don't build a secret door." I wrote, "I am not a beam. I am a wall. Hang pictures." We taped them under the mantel where only we could see. Near winter, Hank called with the last piece of math. "The fund is healthy," he said. People gave in small, honest amounts. A man left $17.38 in an envelope with a note that said for the light bulbs. We should be able to pay the taxes and replace the roof in spring without asking anyone to sell a memory. I laughed so hard I cried again. It turns out the right number can make you religious. If you're waiting for the scene where reconciliation looks like a parade, it didn't come. Thanksgiving happened. It was awkward and then fine and then something broke and then we laughed. Evan, my brother in the other story, not this life. No, in this life there is only Ruth brought her new girlfriend who makes jewelry out of spoons. The dog stole a roll. We used the cabin the next day as a place to sit quietly and convince our bodies we liked our family again. There is one more thing, the kind of twist that doesn't change the plot but changes how you read the pages behind you. In the drawer under the guest book, someone we think Tasha left a stack of cheap postcards with the word breath printed faintly in the corner. People started taking one as they left, writing a sentence, and mailing it back. We keep them in a shoebox without sorting. When we can stand it, we read a few at random. Last week, a card arrived from a town 2 hours away. The handwriting was familiar, my mother's. Sat in the chair by the east window and painted a worse pine. Brought it home. Hung it above my bed. It is ugly. It is mine. I put the card back in the box and went home and kissed my wife in the doorway. Our light on. Our dog believing in nothing but our hands. If you need a comment hook for the end of a chapter that started with a will and is learning to end with a policy, try this. If a room that broke your house could be turned into a place where other people learn to breathe, would you walk into it? Would you sit in a chair with a blue flag over it that says wall and write down the one rule you wish someone had written for you 10 years ago? And if not, what would you build instead? A shrine, a bonfire, or a table at home where, every Thursday at 7, somebody finally says the thing? The first rule we had to enforce arrived wearing cologne and a lie. Late March, the lake still rimmed with old ice. Trying to remember it was water, I pulled into Pine Hollow with a box of light bulbs and a new kettle. A silver sedan sat crooked near the birches. The cabin door was shut but not latched, and intimacy only buildings and dogs recognize. Voices inside. Laughter with the lid on. I walked in and almost backed out. 2 people mid-30s, the kind of beautiful that looks like effort, stood in the main room, holding each other in a way that told the room a story that wasn't mine. A scarf lay on the chair by the window with a blue flag above it. Chair. On the table, next to the guest book, a phone played white noise. "Hi," I said, quietly, as if I were approaching an animal that hadn't decided whether it was going to bite. "The cabin's open today," I added, "but not for secrets." They startled. The woman flushed, the man squared his shoulders the way men do when they're about to audition for a worse version of themselves. "It's just somewhere to talk," he said. "It is," I agreed, "but our rule is no trials and no altars. And no secret rooms." The woman looked at the blue flags, at the guest book, at my face. We thought, she started, and stopped. We didn't think. I breathed in through my nose the way my therapist taught me and tried to offer policy, not judgment. You're welcome to sit, I said. You're not welcome to hide. If you need a place to decide to tell the truth, this is it. If you need a place to practice lying, it isn't. My name is Liam. I can make tea. They looked at each other, then at the door like a coin toss. The woman nodded. Tea, she said, to my surprise. She sat in the chair under window and stared out at the water that was pretending not to move. The man took a step toward the door and then back, his face doing math. When I brought mugs, he shook his head. I can't, he said, and left in the hurry of a person who has misread a sign and been corrected by a child. She stayed. She didn't tell me a story. She wrote 2 sentences in the guest book. I came here to perform. Was offered a chair instead. Going home. After she left, I stood in the middle of the room and let my body feel the adrenaline it had postponed. The old Liam would have turned to tasks, light bulbs, swept floors, inventory. The man I am learning had a seat and sat. I wrote a note in the log. Enforce Rule 1. Did not become a cop. Did not become a priest. Stayed a person. I taped another blue flag above the table. Table, not for bargains. Back in town, enforcing rules in a room we built was practice for the harder rule we didn't get to choose. Court. A cousin my father's brother's son, Harold, filed a petition to challenge the trust. He didn't say the word affair in the filing. He didn't have to. He wrote undue influence, constructive fraud, and fiduciary duty to spouse. He wanted the bequest voided, the cabin sold, proceeds divided. He said the board was a fig leaf. He said a lot of things that sound sensible when you use Latin and don't put your mouth on the words they replace. Hank read the petition and didn't sigh because he doesn't believe in performing dread for clients. We'll answer, he said. We'll depose if we must. We'll ask the court to see what the paper says and what the paper meant. The trust is valid if the disclaimer is valid. The disclaimer is valid if the signature was informed, voluntary, timely. Is it? Yes, Anna said, steady. I'm prepared to say so under oath. Elaine sat with her hands folded like a woman about to recite a recipe. We won't fight a funeral, she said. We'll fight a sale. The deposition was a long table and small water bottles and a court reporter with perfect posture. Harold's attorney asked questions like he was trying to make sentences become weapons. Anna answered as if grammar could be a form of mercy. Yes, no, I did. I knew. I was not coerced. I consulted counsel. I signed within 9 months. I understood the effect. Did you have an intimate relationship with your father-in-law? He asked, after the lunch break, the way some men say your honor like they have already won. Yes, she said. It was consenting and it was wrong. Did he promise you the cabin in exchange for that relationship? No, she said. He promised me nothing. He gave me attention. I took it. Neither transaction belongs in a deed. That's why I refused it. And yet the trust exists, she said, so that the cabin cannot be a trophy or a punishment. It exists so the worst thing about this story isn't the only thing it does. Hank objected to the form of 3 questions, not because he liked saying objection but because time is a kind of justice and some questions don't deserve much. I answered my own questions when it was my turn. No, I didn't know. Yes, I was angry. No, I don't think trust documents can heal a marriage. Yes, I think governance is better than gossip. The judge quiet. Practical wrote a tidy order weeks later confirming the validity of the disclaimer and the trust's purpose and remarking that charitable intent may coexist with human failure without invalidating either. It read like a person who has lived in a town. Harold sent me a text that said he was just trying to honor Aunt Elaine. I didn't reply. I sent my mother the order instead. She called, laughed once, then told me to bring milk. The letters we owed each other did their work in a room without a judge. Elaine gave Anna her reply in a blank envelope on a Tuesday. Anna waited until Thursday to open it. We sat together at the table and I did what I do when feelings enter a room. I poured water. Anna read. She cried. She handed it to me. Anna, I asked for a record, not a confession. You gave me one. Here is mine. I married a man so useful he could pass for holy in poor lighting. I let him be a lighthouse because I wanted to stand on the shore and not drown. I handed him my storms and called it partnership. He handed you his fatigue and called it being seen. Both exchanges have receipts. I do not bless what you did. I bless the part of you that refused to keep pretending my house was a museum you owed a ticket for entering. I bless you for refusing a deed with my name in the margins. I am not asking you to leave my table. I am asking you to earn your chair. Elaine. We took the letter to the cabin and put it in a drawer labeled Archive and Not Alter because we mean what we say on the blue flags. Repair is never one big scene, it is a roof. In April the shingles surrendered en masse, the way old things sometimes decide to go all at once. We hired a crew for the structural work and did the rest with hands that remembered other jobs. Tasha brought coffee and wrapped her hair up with 2 pencils like a woman preparing to argue with gravity. The school counselor, Miguel, measured twice and cut once and then cut again because wood is honest. Elaine moved like she had always known how, a belt with a hammer hang at her hip like a concession only to physics. Ruth, terrified of ladders, ran the ground, nails, chalk line, music. Anna climbed. She has always been careful with heights, not afraid of falling but opposed to useless pride. She carried shingles up the ladder, passed them to Miguel, came back down with the rhythm of a person who knows when to ask gravity to be a partner. At noon she sat on the porch step and leaned back against my shin and said, I like honest work. It turns guilt into muscle. I like roofs, I said. They ask you to be specific. They don't care about your adjectives. At dusk we finished a section and it looked like a paragraph that finally decided to end. We stood in a line and admired it like a silly family that forgot to be ashamed of being proud. The lake approved with its tiny applause. We slept gloriously that night, the animal sleep that follows work. In June we hosted the first-year vigil, not an event, not a ceremony, just 2 hours where the cabin stayed open after dark for anyone who wanted to sit and remember how a year works. We didn't talk about my father. We didn't talk about any father. We put lanterns out and left index cards and wrote on the whiteboard by the door, write one rule you wish someone had given you. Leave it or take it home. They came, the tired and the trying. A nurse wrote, don't be useful after 7 p.m. A kid wrote, tell me early that I am not your translator. A man put no heroics and then crossed it out and wrote no secret heroics. Elaine wrote paint ugly and under it drew a pine that looked like a joke and a prayer. Anna wrote say window before you build a door. I wrote be a wall. Hang pictures. Ruth wrote eat after the class. Tasha wrote we rest now. We put them in a shoebox. We did not post them on Instagram. We are trying to keep this small enough to be real. Summer yielded to a kind of autumn that acts like a well-behaved guest. We were quiet. That is its own news. The last conversation I had to have was at a place I would have paid money to avoid. My father's grave. I went alone on a weekday when the cemetery sounds like a library, pages, distant cars, the occasional metal clang of maintenance being useful. I stood there, hands in pockets like a teenager, and said out loud what I had been avoiding writing anywhere because writing makes things official and I am tired of laws. You are not big enough for the job you made for yourself, I said. You are too useful to learn how to be loved without a task. You exported your relief onto someone who lived in my house. I won't be your instrument. I won't be your revenge either. I set a small thing on the grass, my own index card from the vigil with be a wall. Hang pictures on it. I do not know what dead men do with advice. I do know living sons need their hands to be empty sometimes. On the way out I passed a man I recognized from the breathing room. He nodded, not intrusive, the way people who have learned to keep their eyes on their own grief nod. Roof looks good, he said. I wanted to laugh at the weird holiness of that sentence and cry at the way it beat any eulogy. Home was spaghetti and burnt garlic again because some meals deserve to be bad if only to prove we are not performing. Anna burned it less this time and we congratulated ourselves like children. We are not a movie. We are a house with repaired pipes, a Thursday table, a dog who finally believes we won't forget his dinner. The trust has bylaws now and a line item called light bulbs that always makes me tear up because a man once left $17.38 in an envelope and called it his part. Harold sends Christmas cards with photos of a boat I bet he can't pilot. Elaine paints pines that are losing their shyness. Ruth dated the spoon jewelry woman for a while and now brings a teacher who laughs with her teeth. Tasha's permission class has a waiting list. Miguel hangs framed straight and refuses to talk about feelings while he's holding a level, which is fine, the level is good at it. Anna and I still fight. We still do ugly truth and sometimes we pretend we're too tired and then do it anyway because it's Thursday. I still reach for wrenches when I'm scared and then put them down because fear is not a pipe. She still wants a window some days and a door others, and we try to name it in time. We haven't made children the hinge of our redemption. We planted 2 trees. We call them ours and water them. They are specific. They will get taller than our best version of ourselves. The cabin's guest book is a mess of bad pens and good sentences. Last week someone wrote, "I didn't fix anything. I didn't break anything." I needed that. I think that might be the whole point. If you're reading because you want a verdict, I can give you only a policy. No alders, no trials, shares, windows, names of things. If you want a question to carry into your own kitchen or comment section because stories like this are only useful when they become someone else's mirror, try this one. If a room in your life has become where the worst thing happened, would you burn it, sell it, or turn it into a place where the next tired person gets to sit without being useful? And if you chose the third, what single word would you hang above the door for anyone who comes in after you? Window for air, door for change, wall for boundaries, or chair for rest? I don't know the right answer. I only know the one we wrote on a cheap plaque with a hardware store stencil and screwed crooked above the cabin door because we were laughing. This is the breathing room. Tell the truth. Sit down. Go home if you need to.